Hi, my friends. Welcome to today's episode. I am beyond excited because today is the last interview we're doing before our hiatus. It's kind of a lie. It's not our last interview, it's our last guest that's coming on. And this amazing human being, Nichole Beiner Powell-Newman, is somebody that I start the episode kind of nerding out about how we kind of cross paths, but somebody that is just a next level human being who brings so much kind of joy to every room that she's in, even if it's a virtual room, and is just such a kind, deeply kind person. And so I'm very excited for those of you that don't know her yet to get to know her. And those of you that already know her and are listening to this episode because you know her, well, just welcome to us basking in the glow of Nichole for a while. So just to give you a little bit of background, Nichole is a troublemaker of the best kind. She's focused on creating equitable cultures of belonging so that we can thrive as our full selves. And we talk so much about that in this episode. She's a speaker, she's a facilitator, and she's the CEO and founder of Nicole Gabrielle & Co., a leadership and culture consulting company that focuses on breaking broken systems. We never talk about that on this podcast. And cultivating courageous cultures of belonging. Oh my goodness. Can you tell already that this is going to be such an amazing conversation? Nichole believes that when we empower others with the knowledge and skills to engage in difficult conversations about the difference between empathy and compassion, we create environments where people of all backgrounds can thrive. I mean, could this not be the most beautiful way and the most beautiful bio you can have for a person? Nichole and I nerd out on so many different things in this episode. We talk a lot about what it is to honor and understand our younger selves and how our younger selves experience of being seen as other or being rejected from belonging, how that can impact how we show up each and every day. These stories that Nichole shares, I think are stories that most of us can relate to in some way, even if it's not the exact same experience. We have these scenes that show up in movies time over time that really happen to so many of us, of feeling like we're on this cusp of either belonging or being exiled. And so we nerd out on this, but we also dive deep on how that not only impacts our younger selves, but ourselves today, and hopefully helps us build a future where we can all belong just as we are, not by trying to be somebody else. We talk a lot about what it is to hold space for a world where not everybody is in the same level of ableism within our society of ableism, the ableism dynamics, and how we aren't necessarily set up to succeed if our bodies aren't set up exactly the same way as what is seen as normal. We talk a lot about how the medical system is set up for many of us to either not be seen as fully human or treated as fully human, and therefore it stands in the way of us actually being able to be treated focused on our wellness versus on our disease or the illness that's there. What it is to be able to advocate for yourself in those positions and spaces where you aren't able to be operating at your full capacity, or if your full capacity isn't what the doctor sees as normal, how difficult it can be for you to have the energy and the ability to advocate for yourself when you might be in a state of crisis or trying to survive a really difficult experience. So we talk a lot about that here. How important it is for us to honor and acknowledge that as human beings, we are going to be releasing parts of ourselves as we grow, that there are going to be experiences that will shape and shift the way that our path moving forward is going, but also who our community is, who we're able to find real deep connection with, and people maybe in the past we were that we might need to release, that we get to know different versions of ourselves as we grow, and that inevitably we will never be who we are at this moment nor who we were. We are constantly evolving and changing, and what that does to our ability to, one, connect with the person that we are and the part of ourselves that's the core that will be with us for the entire time we are in our existence, but also two, to allow us to create space and permission for other people to be operating different than we are, rather than seeing them as a comparison point of where we should be, whether we are better or worse than them, but more of a much larger swath along the spectrum of what it is to be human, and that we are able to be different from one another and exist fully as that human we are, without it being that you are a threat to my existence and I am a threat to yours because we are different. I hope for each and every one of you that is trying to navigate your own journey to belonging right now, that this episode gives you as much affirmation that you belong just as you are and you are inherently valuable, as both of us felt on the other side of this conversation. And so without further ado, I'm so excited for you to get to know more about our wonderful guest, Nichole. Nichole, welcome to Checkbox Other. I am so freaking happy that you're here right now.
Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to be here. It is honestly like the highlight of my month. So I'm so stoked.
Right, already, my body's overheating in excitement. All right. Well, for those of you that don't know, Nichole and I met each other in like a serendipitous meet cute in a networking community years and years ago. And then recently we were at I got to go see an event where she was speaking. And so we're going to make sure that you get a chance to watch her incredible keynote, Fearless Fire Talk. It was just next level. And so it reconnected us, reunited us, and was the impetus to be like, Nichole, come on, Checkbox Other, please, please, please. So I am so happy you're here. What I will say is the way that we usually just start this is I hand the microphone over and I say, hey, can you give us a Cliff Notes version of your journey, the twists, the turns, and the aha moments that led you to where you are today? So here's the mic. Go for it.
Oh man, that is a rough one. Cliff Notes is not my specialty, but they definitely got lots of my money. So I like to say that I'm a wave maker and that I've been a wave maker since I was born. One of the things that I told in a recent story, I was actually born premature, like very premature, like a month and a half to 2 months early. Okay. And so in a very like real way, I came into the world fighting, and I feel like I haven't stopped. And that's really what I've been reflecting on in this most recent chapter. And I'm happy to get into that later. But yeah, I grew up, actually, I'm from New York originally. I grew up in Miami, and then we moved to the suburbs of New York, where I did the rest of my schooling until college. And then I went to college really excited. I knew I was going to be a lawyer, and I went there with a plan, and I just did that plan. Supposed to be muted. Everything gets turned off. Yeah, so I went to college with a plan. I was like, all right, I'm going to stick to this plan. I'm going to become a lawyer, and I'm going to change the world. And some of that happened. Some of that happened on a micro scale. In a lot of more ways, the world changed me. And I've just been rolling with it ever since. So I think advocacy is kind of just in my spirit. And I loved being a lawyer. I practiced corporate law, I practiced immigration law, I worked with human trafficking victims, I worked with victims of child exploitation. I had an incredible job working for the federal government with an incredible group of people. And yeah, I've done kind of a bunch of different things. Then I developed a mysterious, and I'll put that in air quotes for anyone who's listening, a mysterious neurological disorder that totally upended my life. And that's part of the season I'm in now, is what does it mean when the thing you have kind of defined yourself by your whole life is no longer the thing you can lead with. And so that has been a big part of my decolonizing journey, is how do we separate ourselves from the thing we do, and how do we make a life when it is not lockstep with what other people expect.
Yeah. So, and even what we expected, right?
I mean, exactly. Yes.
The younger version of ourselves expecting. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Or the yesterday version of ourselves. Like, who knows? Who knows? And so that's kind of where I'm at now. I run a consulting company with my mom and my husband. We do leadership consulting and a lot of facilitating work. Just having people learn how to people together. How do we have hard conversations? How do we show up honestly? And how do we welcome each other into spaces where we historically haven't been welcomed? And that is some of my favorite work to do. And I'm hoping to be able to get people to invest in that work more often in a way that doesn't necessarily fit, a checkbox. So I thought this was the most, I was just like, please ask me to be on your podcast. So as you did, I was like, yes. So I'm really, really excited to be here today and just to be in conversation with a kindred spirit. It just really makes me just relieved.
Oh, well, I'm so glad you're here. I just need you to know that, first of all, I just learned so many things about you that I didn't know. And I've been following you on social media and, all the things that you feel like you're like, oh, I know that person. You don't, which even gives even more of that. Let's give more spaces for people to people, right? Versus us using technology to short circuit what it is for humans to connect with each other. So I love so much about just my own personal experience of this very short period of this so far, but also so many pieces of the things that you just shared about your story I feel like resonate with people in many different ways and different levels. And so I'm so excited about that. I am so curious to hear from you of like a time in your life where you felt other or different that is standing out to kind of I always think of it as like, is there a through line? Is there a part of it that is like so obviously like, oh, okay. At the point in time, I didn't feel like I belonged or I felt other, but that shows me so much about life right now. So can you talk about a time in your life? And I always say this, if you have more than one that you'd like to share, you're more than welcome to do that too.
I was gonna say, I don't know how to pick one. I honestly, it is easier to pick the times in my life where I felt like I belonged than it is to name the times I haven't, because those feel far more distinct and far less frequent, to be honest, which is really a sad thing when you think about it. And so a lot of the work I do is on belonging, because I have never felt like I've belonged. I've always felt like I am too much, like I am too loud or too, really just too much and not enough at the same time. And that, I feel like, has been my life in a large nutshell. And so one time that sticks out to me was, I couldn't have been more than 4 years old. And I wanted to jump rope with some girls at my daycare. And they said I couldn't because, and they used a slur, a racial slur, and that racial slur is not allowed to jump rope with them. And I didn't even know what it meant. And I didn't even know it had to do with my skin color. And I understood skin color because as an Afro-Latina, my family looks all different. And so like there are all sorts of shades of us. So I understood that people have different skin colors, but I had never attributed good or bad to any of them. It was just like, everybody is part of this family and it doesn't matter that they look different. And I actually don't remember this as vividly as my parents remember it. And I remember them telling me about this and how heartbroken they were to like hear that moment and to have to respond to that moment to me. And when they recounted that to me, I was like, oh, wow, this really has been going on my whole life. Like really from like such an early age and such an innocent thing. Like I want to jump rope, like, and I feel like that has happened in so many iterations going to predominantly white schools where I wasn't Black enough to hang out with the Black kids, and I certainly wasn't white enough. And then you add to that I was in honors and AP classes. And so I was just this like smart, nerdy person that like people didn't think was cool to hang out with. And that was really lonely. Like, what do you do? Where do you fit? For me, I eventually found like a couple people that I fit with. I don't feel like I've ever had like these huge friend groups. I've had these like little groups of people from different places where I've just kind of found my space. And as a misfit, they've just let me be. And I did that. And then it was such I'll use this example because I remember so vividly going to school, going to high school. And when my friends weren't in my same lunch period,
Yeah.
not knowing where to sit. And I feel like this is a story like everyone can understand how terrifying a lunchroom can be, and how you don't really want to sit by yourself. And when you sit by yourself, it's amplified that you are by yourself.
Yeah.
But if you sit where you don't belong, that also amplifies things. And so I remember that tension and just really wanting to think of like trying to think of different ways to skip lunch. Like, where can I eat lunch somewhere else? How quickly can I eat and go to somewhere else?
Yeah.
Sometimes I got really lucky, and I'll put this in air quotes too. My mom was actually a teacher at my high school. And
Okay.
so sometimes when I was lucky, yeah, she's great. And I love her, and she's a fantastic teacher. She
You're
actually
working
taught
with her
me.
now. Yeah.
It was really actually a cool experience. But the air quotes here because it's a really sad thing to look back at.
Okay.
Like a child, even as teenagers, we're still children, not wanting to be around friends during lunch, or not wanting to be around peers, at least, and I would finish my lunch and go to my mom's classroom and either just sit in her class in the back of her classroom, or if she had a free period, I would just sit there because like I belonged there, and that was okay. And I'm getting like emotional saying that, but it was such a like sad thing that it wasn't safe to be around my peers, and for a variety of reasons. And I will contrast that with, I joined the swim club. I joined 2 swim clubs, actually. I love swimming, and the water is one of the only places I've ever felt like I belong.
Yes.
And I just loved my coach, really, really loved my coach. And he actually encouraged me to get my lifeguarding certification when I was like, as soon as I turned 15. And he helped me get my first lifeguarding job. And it was one of the best jobs I've ever had to this day.
Wow.
Just working with other people who accepted me exactly as I was. And we were all different ages, different like races, ethnicities, and we all just like were on the same page. It was just like, okay, this person, likes to sit and read. This person is going to be the person who's going to get everyone up and ask them to play volleyball. Like, your job is to make sure people don't drown and the kids are entertained. And like, it was the best job. To this day, there are days where I tell my husband, like, maybe I should like try and get certified again. Like, I know I'm disabled, so like, I don't know, maybe if they can really accommodate that, but like, it would be the best thing if I could get certified again and just do that job, because it was just so wonderful.
There's so many beautiful parts to this. I think there's something so gorgeous about there. Just for you all, before we hopped on, we were chatting for a little while, and we were talking about just this feeling of liberation and getting to know yourself and giving yourself permission to be you, which we'll dive into here too. But for those of you that aren't watching the video, I have a painting behind me, and it's a painting of a woman in a red bathing suit. And so I always think of lifeguards as like, the red, maybe Baywatch did this. I have no idea, unless this is just like normal uniform, right? We'll just say that. We won't give it all to Baywatch. But there is something so powerful and connected to yourself that lifeguarding offers you as an alternative to what it is for girls and women to grow up in the society in a bathing suit. And so I love so much how there was a sense of home, showing up in a world, showing your skin in a way that as a 4-year-old, you were being told, well, because of that, you can't be here. There's so much power in the, it's not minutia, but in the unspoken elements of what you just were talking about, that was all about acceptance. And then it being, we're here together, and our jobs, they can be life and death. They actually really do matter. And when the life and death is real life and death, all the other crap that starts dividing us gets a chance to dissolve, so we can actually see the reality. And so I love so much of that. So again, chills. See, we went from heat in the body to chills in the body. So I love that. I also want to acknowledge something that you talked to, that I think for many of us that didn't have our experience of feeling other in a time and a place where we were aware of it happening. So it happens so early, even before you're verbal, the world is actually looking at you that way before you understand that there are eyes looking at you. That so often when we start to be able to understand what's happening, it's become so normal to the way that we navigate the world, that those stories start giving us permission to say, oh, you know what? It isn't just the way I exist. It's how people have placed labels and definitions and perceptions on me, but they placed them on me before I was even given a chance to understand that there were options chosen. It reminds me, I remember I was older I wasn't 4, but this person knew me when I was 4. One of my very dear friends that I met when I was in like preschool. I grew up in a predominantly white town in Connecticut, and her father, at her baby shower, her daughter, I think now is like 7. So we'll say 7, 8 years ago. I accidentally showed up 23 hours early. So really, in my mind, I thought I was
You
an
were
hour.
just really excited.
Well, I was an hour late, and I was like, I'm so sorry I couldn't get here. And they're like, no, you're actually 23 hours early. So I got the chance to hang out with her and her family, who I'd known since I was so young, but we hadn't seen each other in a while. And we're sitting out on their porch. That, again, this is the place they lived my whole childhood. So very familiar. And her dad came out and was like, it's really just too bad how they treated you. And I was like, excuse me? What do you mean? And he was talking about playing soccer, which a huge part of, like, you're talking about swimming and the coach relationship of feeling seen, the team relationship of feeling seen, huge part of my identity with soccer. And my friend's father saying to me, oh yeah, you were racially discriminated against the entire time of you trying out for soccer teams. Like, you were by far the most able, you knew the most of things, blah, 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 blah. Like, because I lived, breathed, and kicked a soccer ball before I could walk. Like, it was like part of who I was. He's like, yeah, it was very obvious to me as a parent on the sidelines that you weren't. And I was like, well, and it granted so much permission for all of this weight that I had put around myself, that I wasn't good enough. Even though I knew I was good enough, there was something about me that no matter what I could do wasn't going to be good enough.
Yeah.
And that permission of at least seeing my younger self and having someone else's eyes clock it and recognize that it was wrong, healed, again, younger self, as we're talking about a different self, but also gave permission in real time. And as I move forward, to be like, okay, what people see of me and who I am are two different things. And I have the choice to be able to actually see the difference and understand the factors at play. And so there's a huge part of your parents being willing to talk to you about that. Because I think, yes, it's a really painful thing for them as parents, but for you as a 4-year-old, I'm sure that exile feeling is hitting on all the survival mechanisms that a 4-year-old only has very kind of binary ways of looking at the world. Being like, okay, I don't really know what's wrong with me, but there's something wrong with me.
Exactly. Yeah.
So powerful. And I guess reparative in the sense of, like, if we don't know that it's broken, we need to shine a light to see it's broken so we can set it. There's so much power in that happening. And also finding, I'm going to bring it to the lunchroom version of self, that you found the person and that loves you so much. And you're like, you know what, this place isn't able to have space for me to expand and be myself, but there is a pocket of love here. And while it feels sad because we've been given all these like mean girls examples of what it is in social status to be accepted, to actually find someone who truly creates and holds space for you to be yourself is a really powerful thing. And to me, it's like the fighter you started with, right? That you're like, I came in fighting, and you know what? If y'all aren't going to let me here, I'm going to find the pocket and the space for myself to be able to thrive. That's so, So powerful. And yeah, heck yes for that nerd brain that can figure that stuff out. I'm here for it. So there are so
Yeah.
many pieces of this that just felt like they painted a through line in a way that they were in different pockets and spurts of your life, but are so informative to how you're viewing the world now and operating in not only how you can connect to yourself, but create spaces for other people to be able to hopefully find pockets of belonging as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting you say it that way because I actually didn't really see that through line until you started, and I was like, oh yeah, that does actually that lines up that way. So I love that reflection back, and I appreciate it so much. And I want to say that sometimes, like I was really lucky. My relationship with my mom has always been pretty close, and I was really lucky that she was there in school and that I could go there and at least, even if she didn't really understand why I was going there, like she just was like, all right, this is what
Come
you
on
do.
in.
Yeah. And that's really how she is. Um, and I'll say that it can be really uncomfortable sometimes because when you think you know a version of yourself, right? So if that's the version of myself I always knew, like, okay, I'm gonna find a way out. I'm gonna just opt out of this thing, and I'm gonna just maybe not like that I don't have that many friends, but I'm gonna accept it and embrace the ones I have. Um, and then either something changes outwardly or inwardly. It's really confusing. It can be really confusing and disorienting. Both, I know it was for me, as I've grown and become, some people have been like, wow, you're way more radical now. And I'm like, I don't see this as radical. I see it as I've evolved. And yes, I'm louder. And so if you thought I was loud then, first, it's probably like, all the isms that made you think I was loud then, because I really wasn't that loud. And it's just I'm coming into myself more, and I'm a little more confident and a lot less afraid of just showing up. And I really attribute that to community, and finding people like you, finding people like Eduardo and the team at Fearless Fire, because when you find people who will have your back or who will get pieces of your experience,
Yeah.
or who won't fully understand it but can connect and hold space for you, you become less afraid about sharing that experience. You kind of surer of yourself, and everything in you expands. And that's part of what I love about the painting behind you, is just she's just expanding. Her arms are folded behind her head and she's expanding, and you can tell, like, all those things that we fear that make us close in tight
Yeah.
aren't there.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I go into spaces all the time and I say belonging and community matter. And they're like, oh, that's so fluffy. Like, why, like, why are you so touchy-feely? How does this matter to our bottom line? And I'm like, well, really, it's everything. And I don't really have enough time to explain to you how this matters. Like, because I'd have to show you my lifetime of how it matters, show you how I take up more space, and show you the times where I'm afraid to take up space, and how I have to go to those places where I know supportive community exists to remind me, no, you deserve to exist. You deserve to exist in this body. You deserve to take up space. And it is sad and provides me hope that there's, room for improvement. That we are in a place in 2023 where the statement "you deserve to exist" is a revolutionary statement. But for so many people in so many communities, I saw a post today, by someone in the disability community, and that was most of what the post was about, just reminding themselves that their existence is a revolutionary act of joy, even though it makes other people uncomfortable the way they exist in the world. Um, And I think that's the piece that I am holding on to now,
Yeah.
is that what I am doing is revolutionary. And I hope that my nieces and nephews get to be that expansive person.
Yeah.
And if I don't show up this way, if I don't show up both strong in my truth and willing to evolve, then I'm not leaving the space for them to do that, and to grow up normalizing.
Yeah. I love that. There's so many pieces. Oh, there's so many pieces. My brain's like firing on so many levels. See, we needed to. I'm so glad we're here. The thing that keeps coming to my mind about this is moving from this idea, or really just, I think, existence of operation as normalized for many of us, that we're just meant to survive. We're meant to make it to the next day, make it through lunch period, make it through school, make it through the workday, make it through your 20s, make it through whatever, right? Make it through whatever hurdle is there. And for many of us, especially if you aren't allowed to take up space or make noise in your actual human being emotions, do it with a smile, do it quietly, and make it so other people are comfortable. But what it is to step into the world where it's not about surviving anymore, but it is about giving yourself space to watch what happens when there's room for you to potentially explore what thriving looks like. Not even that I'm magically surviving to thriving, but like, what does it look like for me to start putting my feet on the ground, or start dipping a toe in the water as a lifeguard? Like, what is it for me to just even explore life outside of survival? Right. And that doesn't mean sunshine, rainbows, there are no blips, there are no hurdles. Will always be hurdles, right? But what is it for me to honor the fact that life is going to be challenging, and that every waking moment doesn't have to be focused solely on surviving it, that I can find pockets of joy, that I can find pockets of connection. And I think one of the things that when I got a chance to witness your talk, I thought was so important and powerful, was being able to acknowledge those moments in our lives where we really do have to be focusing on survival. We really do have to advocate for ourselves. We have to honor and acknowledge those moments of like, well, I know that joy is here, but like, in order for me to get to the next moment, I got to focus on this. And on the other side, the power of being seen by people, even in those most vulnerable moments. Do you mind talking a little bit about what that experience has been like for you in advocating for your like ability to survive, literally live and breathe and make it through the, again, you use air quotes of like mystery of the hurdles and the changes that you've had in the neurological changes in your life, and then how that has impacted your ability to use your body fully, to be able to even just advocate out loud for the things that you need? Can you talk a little bit about what that's been like?
Yeah, getting sick was such a turning point in my life, not just because I'm now dealing with a different body, but so many of the things that I studied or talked about in theory had to learn in real life what they look like.
Yeah.
And it is one thing, people say this all the time, and I remember kind of rolling my eyes about this, like being like, okay, yes, but you could still learn something through someone else. And
Yes.
that's true. That is true. You absolutely can learn things. I love books. I highly recommend people read them. And still, there is something about the lived experience that academia does not value enough. That book publishers are not really paying attention to, that has so much power and so much knowledge. And I think that as non-white people, you learn through a lot of times ancestral knowledge, and it's been devalued as society has said, no, that's not important. But I learned very quickly that these things we talk about belonging, about when we talk about racism and how it shows up, and when we talk about these things, there are a lot of people out there who want to say, like, this isn't really necessary, or this is in the past. There are a lot of people who want to say, okay, but like, that was before, how does that matter to you now?
Mm.
And getting sick was a crash course in how it matters right this second. And I will say that even pre getting sick, I've had asthma most of my life. There was a time in law school where I had an asthma attack. And this is the first time that I really, like, all the pieces just clicked in my head. And I was like, whoa, this is how the systems work.
Oof.
Because I had as a really terrible asthma attack. I ended up getting in an ambulance and taken to the ER. And my incredible friends from law school, who are really dear family to me, came and checked on me. They snuck me in some food. And what I remember distinctly is I knew I had asthma. I knew, like, okay, the stress, the tired, the this, all of these things are causing this asthma attack. But you go into a new place and they start, from the bottom of the thing. So I'm like, all right, sure, let's go through all the questions, but I know where we're going to end up. If you want to listen to me, we could like skip 1 through 10 and just go on. But we did the 1 through 10 thing, whatever. They admitted me overnight just because they didn't like how my lungs sounded. And I was like, they've sounded like this most of my life. It's okay. I was like, as long as I don't have pneumonia, I promise, like, it'll be fine. Which in itself is such a mind, like, I don't know.
We're here. If you wanted to say mind fuck, it's allowed. It's allowed. Yep.
Okay. I was like, oh. But yeah, it's such a, like, it was such an ableist way of thinking of like, this thing's happening in my body, but like, it's not bad enough for me to stop. But it's something I had learned even as early as like middle and high school, right? Like, you do sports and your coach tells you, in fact, my coach used to tell us, and I do love him to this day. I adore him and respect him, and I'm so grateful for him. But I've had to unlearn this. He used to tell us oxygen is a privilege. And we just, okay, so you swim and you're not drowning. So you keep going and your lungs might be burning, but you don't need that breath of air. And so you keep going. And that was a metaphor for so much of my life. And I think it is true. It is a privilege in a beautiful way, if we can look at it. It wasn't then, but now I can look at it in a beautiful way and be like, oh yeah, like, it is a privilege that I get to breathe on my own. But that day in that hospital, as they're going through these things and they're being so careful and asking me all these questions and being like so very inquisitive, there's a woman in the bed next to me, and she is Puerto Rican. She is overweight. She is in her 65, 70s, I would say. And she has this terrible cough. And I mean, it does not sound good. And she is pressing the button for help over and over again. And so I ask her, like, I will call for someone if I can, like, what can I do? What's wrong? And so she starts telling me, she's like, oh, I'm here. I've been here all the time. Like, I have this wrong with me and this wrong with me. And she's just got a lot of health issues. And I'm like, all right, let me see if I can get someone. And what stood out to me the most was when they came in the room, they came to me. And she's the one pressing the button, right? So like, they come to me, and I know it's because they knew I was in law school. I know it's because they had taken my, like, all my history and all of these things. And so I knew it was my education that was getting me attention. And it was just so heartbreaking to see. And then to listen to them talk to her, and the difference in the way they talk to her versus when they talk to me, really, it just hurt. And it made me so sad. And it made me just realize how many people, like, get treated and mistreated
Yeah.
on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I was like, wait, all of these things we talk about can feel really amorphous, but they have concrete applications. And so when we're not talking about connection, when we're not talking about belonging, every moment we don't and we ignore those or we call them fluffy, we are putting other people's lives on the line. And it is very literally a moment of life or death for some people.
Oh yeah.
And so that's one thing that really stood out for me when I got sick was if I didn't know exactly how to advocate for myself, how to show up, if I was not insistent over and over again, if I didn't use my own network, there is so much value in your networks. And if I didn't use it, I mean, I was stuck with one doctor who was afraid to tell me she didn't know. And I was with her for almost a year. And until I realized, oh, she doesn't know. And it took me making that call, right? Like I wanted to believe you. You're taught to believe doctors, right? You're taught like you go to the doctor, they go to medical school. And it really took me showing up one day and being like, well, you're not really changing anything. And I still can't walk. So like, is this ever going to get better? Like, what do I do? How do I change it? And she finally said something along the lines of like, well, you know, there are going to be ups and downs. And I was like, sure, but we've only seen lots of downs. So like, are there going to be ups? Like, and I finally got the sense, oh, she really has no idea what's going to happen. And she's out of ideas. And that's when I was like, okay, I need to find another doctor. And I know that there are a lot of people, and I've seen this with people in my family. I know there are a lot of people who don't do that at that point, who just keep on and say, well, the doctor said there'll be up and downs. And I can tell you, and I hate to like use examples like this sometimes because some people will be like, wow, this is such a, you know, on the nose example, but it really, this is how it actually really happened. I switched doctors after that appointment. And I was like, she doesn't know. I used my network to find another doctor who's very specialized neurologist. And there's a lot of privilege in this, you know, a lot of privilege in having this wide network, privilege in being able to get from Boston, which is a top medical city, to New York, another top medical city, and get in at these institutions where when I first got sick, the doctor I saw was like, oh yeah, you have to see a neurologist. And oh yeah, the wait time is like 4 months. And I was like, I'm literally falling when I try to walk. Like, how am I supposed to wait 4 months? And she just shrugged, like literally shrugged. And so I recognize all the privilege that in being able to change doctors and see this other doctor. And that doctor changed one medicine. And that one medicine was the difference between me only being able to walk to the bathroom and back on a good day, and me now being able to stand up and do a talk, like fearless, even though there are lots of things around it that I have to do, like, but I could have never done that if I had stayed with that doctor. And it was that one medicine. And I went back to her, and I highly recommend anyone who deals with doctors, if you switch doctors, going back and giving feedback and saying, you know, like, here's what happened, or here's a recommendation for next time. And I did. I went back to her and I said, you know, I went and saw this other doctor in New York. She was not happy with me at all. She was the head of her department, and she was really unhappy that I like questioned her. And I said, they changed one of my medicines, and it was a simple change as the medicine, the extended release version. It's the same exact medicine, but just a different formula. And that is making such a difference in my life. And she had never heard of it. And I said, so I'm just sharing this with you because it really is making a difference. And I want you to be aware of that so that you can, when you help your other patients. And she was not thankful for this information at all. But I knew that it mattered, right? So it's that reaction. of realizing that you have to be hyper vigilant sometimes, to get the care that you really need. And that even when you are hyper vigilant, sometimes other factors come into play, and the best way you can advocate for yourself is pulling other people in. And this is why, part of why I'm such a big component, not component, such a big proponent of community, because that's how you get ahead. That's how you actually, say, okay, wait, there is power in numbers. There is a lot of power in the knowledge that we can get amongst us all, that we can learn which doctors not to see, which doctors we should try and see. And that's where I think that a lot of people just can get so overwhelmed that they forget to reach out. And there is so much power that gets lost. And I think if I could go back and tell, fully able-bodied Nichole something, it would be to stop taking so much for granted. And I don't say that in like a, cliche kind of cavalier way. I say that in really, I live in a body right now that from minute to minute, everything can change. Like in 2 minutes, I could stop losing control of my arms, like I'm like sweating now, and there's nothing I can do about these things. And the world is not really ready to accommodate it.
Right.
And so what strikes me is how often I was the person overlooking someone like that woman in my hospital room. Yeah. And when it was obvious, like that woman in my hospital room, I saw it. But there were so many other times that you ignore. There are people you ignore. There are things you ignore. There are things that you're like, oh, this person's really annoying, or this person is this, but they're actually dealing with like very serious, maybe illnesses, maybe mental health illnesses, maybe just like they're really upset or depressed, right? And we don't give people that grace. We don't really give people that space to be. We just kind of label them, ignore them, and move on because it's not relevant to us in that moment. And I think that's the piece. I notice now that I stop even more now. If there's a person experience homelessness, I like stop as frequently as I can and give them, even if it's like $1, whatever I have. I'm just more attentive to the people that society overlooks, in part because I realize how frequently I am that person. So yeah, I think that's one thing that really being sick has shown me, is just how much better we can make the world when we're willing to look, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, there's so many pieces of this that are also tying back to your talk. So for those of you truly, I know I mentioned this at the top, but I highly recommend, we'll have a link for you to watch Nichole's talk. One of the pieces that you talked a lot about it was the curiosity with which you operate in the world and the asking of why. And what I'm hearing in a lot of this is this dance between, I'm going to try not to get too big on a soapbox here, but this dance between like the competitive nature of what happens when we're supposed to live in a very patriarchal white supremacist world, colonizer, power over everybody, right? And so if I need to have power over you, that means I have to beat you. So you're always competition. I need to be superior to your inferiority. So I'm constantly ranking myself. So I don't get to see you as a real person. But that also is just feeding this like ridiculous, dangerous and poisonous beast of an ego-centric way of living. And I think you're talking about going to law school and you talk about doctors. I mean, they are the jobs that we glorify as the best of us, right? And especially, I feel like there's always in families where you're children of immigrants or immigrants, like the doctor, lawyer. That's those options, right? But I think there is a part of this that's like, those are not the only options on how to do these things. It's not the only option on how to do life and how to succeed in life. And I think oftentimes the way that you're talking about this connection-based, belonging-based way of opening up things, it feels like in order to do that, You actually are, it's not that I don't like the good feeling about it. It's really that if you ask me to do that, you're going to ask me to acknowledge the parts of life that I'm ignoring. You're going to ask me to really look at the people that are unhoused and realize how much I haven't seen them. You're going to ask me to actually look at the parts of myself that I've squirreled away so that my ego can actually lead me forward versus my vulnerability allowing me to open up and maybe feel like I don't know something. And as you're talking about this doctor, like, I mean, first of all, there's the part of me that just moved from Boston to New York and knows the Boston, like, nah, the fuck the Yankees energy, whether it's the baseball or not, that energy is very real, right? And also the feeling of, I'm thinking of this as, a woman in medicine, not necessarily the predominant demographic, right? So there's a lot of kind of protective nature, but also you have this identity that has been built up over years of like the doctor as the god on earth being able to save and dictate how things work, right? And the permission that if only you give yourself permission, no matter what your title is, no matter what your business card is, but as a human being to lean more into the curiosity that little Nichole embraced, that little me Nichole also was always and still am always asking like all the questions and like, can you shut up and just listen to what I have to say? And it's like, right, but what you have to say isn't actually answering the question. You can keep saying the same thing over again, but I'm still not getting the answer. Like that was something that was squashed out of us. That's when you're being too much. It's when you're being too precocious or you're being, who do you think you are that you're able to ask adults these questions that they don't want to answer or they don't want to feel? Like all of that curiosity against the kind of egocentricity, the certainty, the power holding, and that battle dehumanizing us from our own human experience, but definitely from connecting with each other and the gap that happens. Because while I know the woman that you were talking to, the doctor, is like not receiving it, she's receiving it. Next time she has this person, right? This is the legacy building you were talking about with your nieces and your nephews. Like the ability to know that I'm going to go do that. You're going to probably hate me. You're going to probably treat me like crap, whatever. But I know the next person that walks in here will have the option between the time release capsule and the one you gave me. Will have at least the potential to explore this in another. I always think of it as like Cosmo quizzes where you like answer a question
Yes.
a couple
Yeah.
different.
All right.
So,
Like, exactly. Or like goosebump books. Yeah. Like you choose your own ending. Yes, exactly. And
permission to explore. There's permission for the adventure to be something you don't know the end to, because as humans, we don't know. They're just exploring other galaxies right now. How are we supposed to imagine that we know all things? And so giving yourself permission to dance with the ego of it all, understand it, and know that there's going to be parts as you experience ego death, which is a part of this whole, reintegrating with
yes.
yourself, that there is so much possibility to like embrace the expansion of life, even if you're not feeling like you're the smartest person in the room, the most capable person in the room. The fact that you can feel like a full human is even more bolstering and foundationally supportive. So as you're talking about all this, as we're talking about the life and death of it all, but also the kind of unseen, ambiguous hurdles that are so unnecessary, but are also so conditioned and built in our society, how much that stands in our way, I think is incredibly important as we're talking about like, how do we show up and how do we belong? How do we connect with each other? Sure. Hi, my name is Nikki. Let me be your friend. And also, but if I do that and you're already guarded up with everything else, no matter how many times I say hi, there's something else we've got to kind of chip away at. And the permission for us to be able to say, oh, maybe I do have walls up. Okay, that doesn't make me a bad person. That just means maybe I can try something different, or maybe I can give myself permission to realize that not everybody's a threat to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And to permission to have a mirror held up to yourself and to others, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're not going to like what we see.
Yeah.
And just permission for that to be okay, permission to be wrong, and to say, all right, it might take me a little while to accept this one that I was wrong about, but
Yeah.
I can accept that, there's space for me to be wrong. And that doesn't make me lesser of a person, lesser of a, whatever your profession is. It doesn't make me lesser.
Yeah.
It just means I was wrong. And that is one of the most freeing and beautiful gifts entrepreneurship has given me, is space to lean into that. And there have been so many people, I forget who said it, but I heard recently a quote where someone said, they basically said, like, you only get to your genius by being wrong a bunch of times.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, That is so true. Like the biggest things we've done in life. Like I was watching how many times we were watching we were watching PBS on vacation, and there was a special on exploring the different planets. And I mean, there were over 13, 15 different missions just to try to get on Mars or Venus, right? And they fast forward and they're like 20 years later, right? And we're talking about how cool it is that they got on Mars, but we don't talk about the like 22 times they failed. We don't talk about the 20 years that went of people. I like, that's all I could think about. I was like, wow, there were people who went in every day, and every day they were failing at their job. Every day they did their best and it wasn't good enough to achieve the goal, but they still showed up because they had this wider vision of like, all I'm doing is crossing off a possibility. And there are more possibilities that I can uncover. And that switch for me has been so freeing. And I think it's also a big part of, the disability movement, is this idea that we actually are limited in the way we think of what is possible and what is able, who is entitled to be part of society. And I can say for myself, like when I became sick, when I started losing mobility, I learned more possibilities of ways to show up in the world. For me, it became even more evident to me that social media, I know lots of people hate it. I am a person who has always loved it, has always been really fascinated by it. And now I realize, like, actually, it's not social media that's the problem. It's how we use it. That's the problem. It is really incredible that I get to connect with you from different cities and feel supported and energized and like, oh yes, I'm going to go and this is just going to carry me.
Yeah.
Or I could doom scroll and look at all the things that are going to like make me feel sad about the life I could have had. And that's a choice I get to make, and how I show up, what I use things for. Those are all choices I get to make. And when we start looking at it that way, I think that we actually empower ourselves more, because it's like, oh, wait, I do have the power to put something meaningful out or to do something that's meaningful for myself. And that's something I think that we can gift to ourselves any day.
Yeah. One of the things you were talking about before we hopped on was just this rediscovering different parts of yourself and releasing parts of yourself. And I feel like one of the things that I had heard, God, this is years ago, but it was in a talk, and a person was talking, I think it was Mason. If I can find the clip of this, it was such a good talk. But the conversation was around accessibility and ableism. And the fact that, hey, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and oftentimes we're not talking about the ableism of our world. And each and every one of us, if we live long enough, this will be part of our experience, whether it's ours, the people around us, it's going to be a very real thing. You're not going to be able to like dodge it. And so it's really fascinating as you're talking about these things, about like parts of yourself that you have to like reframe, re-engage with, release, and start realizing, oh, the world is so much more than the body that I had when I was however old, than the job I had, than the version of myself I saw, and the permission that we grant ourselves as we fail, because those failures mean that we get to release the beliefs of those things. And also, we fail and it hurt. Let's not act like it doesn't hurt to fail.
It hurts.
It doesn't hurt to fall down. It doesn't also mean that it doesn't exhaust us to use the energy. But we have grown up in a time and a place, in the previous episode that was all about perfectionism here, that like I talked about, I remember there being all these news reports about the best way to parent your child is to play classical music to them in the womb. It's like, give the kid a second. They're trying to like create an ear right now. Don't try to make them now all of a sudden become Mozart. Like let's go at the pace we need to go at to actually be a human being in the human being existence. Yes. And honoring the fact that that's going to evolve, and there are going to be parts of ourselves like a snake, we're going to shed some skin, and that's okay. But there is such a, if I think of like the ageism of how we operate too, there is such a obsession with freezing time and freezing parts of ourselves and staying in that and not allowing ourselves to feel the things that come on the other side of having to witness change, witness aging, and then also come to terms with the impermanence of our existence, that we're not going to be here forever and not everything that always was will be. Like all of this stuff is that really deep stuff that when you set trust, by the way, I already know we're gonna have to nerd out about like the planets and stuff. I will watch every show about that. That kind of stuff. I think there are a lot of people that get really nervous about it because it makes you so insignificant and so small. And also there's such an infinite possibility of things that we don't know. So what is it to allow ourselves to dance with the releasing and the acquiring of new knowledge and being okay with the version of ourselves that is remaining with us all the way through?
So the beach and water is my happy place.
Yeah.
I always say that I really feel like I was meant to be a mermaid. And so I was at the beach last week, and the thing that I love doing the most is going out in the evening or at night, and just watching the waves as the tide comes in after it's been all the way out. So you see sandbars, and the tide starts coming in and starts swallowing them up. And the thing that is just amazing to me is how small it makes me feel,
Yeah.
and how just strong the water is and confident the water is. It just does its thing. It swallows the land. The things that I found, if I were found, hermit crabs or seashells or whatever I found, they're all going to be buried, and none of them are going to be where I found them again. And I don't know if I'll ever find that same space again, but there's something I can stand there and be like, wow, this is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I can stand there and I can look up at the stars and the ocean and the way, and it really does look like a dance that the world just does. We'll do it, whether you watch or not. And it always makes me think about, okay, how can I apply this more to my life? How can I stop being so wrapped up in all the things that, society wraps us in? And it really wasn't until I got sick and became an entrepreneur and was like, I mean, even for me, becoming an entrepreneur was really about, I am bored. I felt like a failure, because this thing I had worked for my whole life, I couldn't do anymore. And I was like, so what do I do with my time? Like, because all I'm doing is calling insurance companies, going to doctors, and like repeat. And so I was like, well, I guess I will start a business. I don't know. It's a really strange brain that I have, and that's fine. That's what I did. And I am grateful to have a very supportive mom and husband, who just went along with it. But it was still from a really like a capitalist place of, I have to be doing to be worthy. And I'm approaching a place now where I'm asking myself, well, what does it look like to just be? And what does that mean for me to just be and for that to be enough? And I'll tell you, it is a really scary question to ask myself and to try and sit with.
Yeah.
Um, Particularly because the rest of the world just looks at you like you're an alien, and they're like all still achieving and doing and like on these like very concrete paths that you are supposed to be on, and opting out isn't supposed to be an option. And here you are being like, well, what does it mean to be? And they're like, okay, the rest of us have bills to pay. And I'm like, sure, but if I pay those bills and at the end of my life, all I've ever done is achieve these goals, and I don't even know what it means, like, who am I if I can't say that I am this? That's the thing. I mean, that's really the thing that sticks with me so frequently. People look at me, I mean, they look at me all sorts of ways now. People do not like to see young disabled people. It
Mm.
is exactly what you were saying. It challenges everything that it brings to play all the ageism. It challenges everything we think that young is supposed to be vivacious and is supposed to be able. And these are the best years of your life, the best, like you can do the most work now, you can do all of these things, right? And so for a lot of people, seeing me is seeing that that is wrong, that
Mm.
that idea we've been sold isn't accurate. And I can see the discomfort when I have my cane, or when I use, especially if I use my walker or if I'm in my wheelchair. I mean, it is palpable, especially, and then there's hope. There's a hope that comes, and I hope that any other people with disabilities and chronic illnesses uh who hear this feel seen, because
Yeah.
you can sometimes imagine that, like, am I imagining this? And then it happens enough times that you're like, oh no, I can predict it happening. And there's this hope that happens when someone asks you, oh, did you hurt yourself? Are you like, were you in an accident? Like, they ask this question and it is curious, but the hope behind it is the thing. And I didn't name it. And this is the first time I've named it. And I was like, that's why it makes me so uncomfortable. It's because there's this hope that you're going to say yes. And then they can say, oh, well, I hope you get better soon. And I was that person, so I can recognize it
Yeah.
now. When you say, oh no, like, no, I'm just, I just have a disability, or oh no, if you feel like elaborating, like, there is so much pushback. Like,
Oh,
they do not. So it's like, oh well, I hope you get better soon. It's like, I just told you I have chronic illnesses.
yeah.
They're not going away. Chronic is in the name. Like, and so it's this interesting thing. It's like you're disappointing people just by revealing this piece of yourself.
Yeah.
And you are disappointing them because you're showing them that the things we are taught in society just aren't true, right? They don't serve all of us.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, that as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, it's not just like, it is the ageism, and it's this idea that young people are supposed to be these producers. And if they're not, then what good are they?
Mm.
And I think there's a bunch of us here to say we're plenty good, even if we don't produce. And there's plenty that just being has to offer. And I'm trying to understand that. And it is really hard when, most of my friends are still lawyers and practicing lawyers.
Yeah.
And they're on the tracks. And so it can be really hard to be like, wow, I feel like a weirdo. Maybe I should just go back to that.
Yeah. Right.
And there's something so liberating about being like, wait, I have time to just pause and explore. What might exploring show me?
Yeah.
And that's the tension that I'm learning to sit with, and that I would love to see more people sit with. What if we took these moments and we dreamed, we rested, we explored, we did something that wasn't producing just
Yeah.
for ourselves? Where would
Yeah.
we end up?
I mean, I've been writing so many notes over here because, first of all, for myself to be like, heck yeah, wisdom dropping everywhere. There is so much projection that you're talking about, of people seeing somebody else's experiences and making it about them. I think you said mirroring initially, and that mirroring, when it's over indexed and it becomes like the evil stepmother in Snow White, like energy, that it's like, my experience isn't necessarily about you. The priority in this exchange isn't your comfort. It's what I need to be able to do life my way. And the other thing that is popping into my mind, that like, I feel like there's so many examples of this, as you give yourself permission to widen your lens and see more possibility, that actually productivity, I'm using air quotes for those listening, is actually something that isn't about burning yourself out and going, giving yourself a more robust experience of life and trusting the energy that you have and honoring the things that you get to bring to the table and looking at the world from a different way while it might be threatening to other people often is the stuff that actually moves us forward. I'll say forward faster, but at least forward in more significant ways. And I love so much as you're talking about the water. Water is something that with my therapist that I worked with for years, who's absolutely amazing, with a coach of mine, water metaphors were coming up all the time. And you talked about the kind of power, but the peaceful power of it and the permission to release control that we cannot control as much as we want to control water. Just look around the news right now, right?
Yep.
And what it is to surrender to understanding that we cannot white knuckle, grasp, control freak our way through life, that there is a level of surrender to being like, all right, I'm going to float and see where the water takes me. I spent so much of my life either bracing for impact, so like being really, really deeply back and like whatever's going to hit me, okay, I can hit. I'm right here right now. My abs are so tight. Don't hit me too hard. And then the part where I have to lean forward and make sure that I can like beat whatever is coming versus just being foundationally sturdy and being like, all right, the water's going to come and it's going to splash against me and it's going to go. And there might be the hermit crabs or whatever that's going to be with it. I don't know. And I also can give myself permission to relax into it and let the ebbs and the flows show up and witness what it is to not be efforting against the reality of what is. And the permission that that gives you to, one, watch yourself in floating and all of the amazing wisdom that comes with that, but also what happens in the refilling of your gas tank that you're not using so much energy to push against the reality that is, and how much possibility there is there. And I think as we're human doings, right? Because we're talking about human beings and human doings, the human doing of it all is to distract us truly from these types of thoughts and these types of exploration that have us decoupling ourselves from capitalism, decoupling ourselves from colonialism, and all of the isms that have us looking at each other as enemies, rather than being like, oh, you know what? No matter what I do, I'm going to be uniquely myself. My journey is going to be just fine, no matter what happens, no matter how much I plan, no matter how much I, to-do list it. I can control everything. And what if I give myself permission to be able to say, I'm going to get to know who this is so that as these things come in, I know what parts of myself to lean on, what parts of myself to let go of, and how to ask for help in a way that feels right for me versus the way that I was taught to be a good producer and asking for help or never asking for help because we want our lungs to be burning for lack of oxygen to show how tough we are.
Exactly. And I do recognize there is a level of privilege in this. There are some people who are operating in spaces of survival where, they need the very basics of like, they need to be grinding to get those things. And I do recognize that. And that is still where I will say there are times, and it is a different, grind, but there are times where it is a struggle for my body just to exist. And this is what I will offer, is that in those times, community or things I've gotten from community have been the lifeline. And so if you find yourself in that survival to grind state and you're like, oh, that's great for these like two women who are like, just in this privileged life, that's nice and easy for them to say, sure, I do. I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. And I do think there's space for everyone to say, how can I add just a little bit to my life? Just a little bit more ease. Like, what happens if I ask myself, what was I put here to do? And the answer can't be just to survive. It just can't. There are so many incredible things in the world and there's a tree outside my window. Like, is it surviving? Sure. It is fighting with nature. I've become a plant person. That's one of the things that being locked in the pandemic did to me. But sure, are all those things working to survive? Sure. But like, is that their purpose? No, it's just something they're doing.
Yeah.
And so I challenge people who are listening and who are saying, well, it's easy to say from a spot of privilege where, you have a house, you have that you live in, you have these things that you need. Yes, I recognize that we all have basic needs that we need to have met to feel even safe, to get to the space of belonging. And you're worthy as you are. You are so important as you are. And if the world around you isn't telling you that, then find people who will, because
Yeah.
you need that buoy to keep
Yeah.
going. And so that's just one thing I wanted to offer, because I know what it's like to feel like I can't keep going. This is too hard. I'm burning myself out all the ways, all the time. And just find the buoy and hold on. And just let yourself kind of flow with the buoy until you have the energy to keep going. And ask yourself why are you here? What were you made for? And it's probably something even more incredible than you've even allowed yourself to dream.
Yeah. I am resonating so deeply with that. I also am seeing lunch from you being like, I know how to do this buoy thing. And look, on the other side of that buoy, I know how to find buoys along the way when I feel like I need a little support. And I also know how to reach out and connect with people, even if it's in unorthodox ways or not all, it's not going to hit all the boxes. I still have this sense of understanding that I'm part of a collective. And I think, again, the individualism of the world that we live in often tears us from the beautiful tissue that we are built with to be connected beings. And so I feel like the way that you show up in the world um, is a proof point of that. I think, again, in your talk, you talked about your unicorns, your friends that you met online that were a huge part of this, that like how important it is to not try to be looking for everything to be perfect or whatever somebody else's filtered version of life is, but honoring and trusting the intuitive hits of this is where I feel like I belong. These people see me. This is okay for me to be myself. And I think there is another part that you talked to is when somebody makes you feel like that you don't belong, maybe they're not the person, they can't see you. It's not your fault that they can't see you. That's not you. It's kind of not your business, even though you're oftentimes in our society being inflicted harm on for that. What is it to seek places where you are more than enough just as you are, no matter how able you are, no matter what your age is, no matter what your gender, no matter what identity bucket it is, there are people and there are places that will receive the fullness, the too muchness and the not enoughness, all of that of you will be received. And I am just so grateful, truly, that there were all you and I, these little specks in the universe, got a chance to interact and connect and collide multiple times. And that at this point, we get to have it recorded in a way that other people get to bear witness to the magic that happens. I am beyond grateful for you taking your time today. How can people get in touch with you? I know that you're evolving in this work and in your business. I am so excited that we have the talk for people to be able to watch as well. What other ways can people connect with you?
Thanks so much. They can go to my website. It's just www.nicholegabrielle.com. Nicole has an H in it. Or you can just find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn the most. I am Nichole Gabrielle or melanin_and_moxie. I've been using that one a lot more and just working on showing up and what does it mean to live out loud. So I would love for you to join me on that journey. And yeah, I would love to connect. So I will plan to have a couple workshops coming up in the future where we'll do some reflection and some kind of somatic work and just some dreaming together. And I was inspired by Rachel Cargill and Ebony Janice, who I'm actually getting to see tomorrow. I'm pretty stoked about this. And they're hosting an event, and they have been asking and provoking the questions. What does it mean for women of color, especially Black women, to live more than just to resist. And
Oh,
so I am leaning more into Melanin Moxie, which is the name of my blog that I started and abandoned about 3 years ago. And so I'm leaning back into that. And so you'll find me there. You'll find me at the blog, melaninmoxie.com. And I hope to just be in conversation. That is my favorite thing to do, is to be in community and conversation with people.
oh, well, I will say this. I'm so grateful that you are in community and conversation here today. As you said, highlight of your month. Yeah, yes. I'm so excited that you, and I mentioned this before we hopped on. You are my last interview for a little while, and I'm so happy because I feel like we just offered like so many gifts delivered to people. Today, as we're recording, everyone, it's Prime Day. So we're giving our own version of like not even 2-day delivery. Like, you're welcome. All of these gifts are lined up on your doorstep. Take them, come back and visit them again. Thank you, Nichole. I am beyond grateful. And I feel like this is just the start of something. So I'm really excited to continue to connect. And yes, everybody go follow Nichole on all the things, go to those workshops. There is so much wisdom that comes when we come together in community too. So thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. And I am just like beyond grateful for you to be existing. And again, that our specs cross paths.
Yes, yes, I am so grateful the universe brought us back together. This has just been such a magical day. So thank you.
Of course, of course. I told you, Nichole is just wonderful. We touched on so many things. I hope that you felt this like aha moment that I felt many times over. I was saying when we stopped recording how much I was trying not to make too much noise as she was saying things that felt like they were opening doors and conversations that would be a whole hour in themselves. I hope that you felt that. I hope you felt seen. I hope you felt accepted and you felt held in this community, in this space that she and I held and talked through what it is to be in this human existence right now. If you are feeling as though you are seeking a place of community and you can't necessarily find it so far, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to Nichole. This is the work that we do. We really don't want you to feel as though you don't belong in this world, because we both believe inherently that just by being here, you do. You are not too much and you are not enough. You are more than enough and inherently valuable exactly who you are. There is so much potential in you being able to see yourself as somebody that has the right to exist, to thrive, and to make inroads and progress and expansively live your life in this time that you have here. So hope that you walk away feeling even more bolstered in knowing that you are meant to be exactly who you are. And there is so much that you have the opportunity to step into when you give yourself permission to just be you. I cannot wait. I will catch you next week on our last episode before our hiatus, where Catherine of my team is going to be doing a bit of an interview with me to give you guys all a sense of kind of what's going on, what our vision is, and how you can stay connected with us during this hiatus. Also, we would absolutely love to hear from you. If you are a longtime listener, I would absolutely love to hear what the experience has been for you. If you have any episodes that you love, if this is your favorite episode, let us know. If you want to hear other things, if you're curious about opportunities to be able to engage with us more, we're playing with different ways to be able to have this podcast evolve in a way that's organic, but also allows us to have even deeper human connection. So I say all that here to preface the fact that we will be coming to you next week with a wonderful episode, just scratching the surface of how we might be able to start charting that path forward on the other side of the hiatus, but also while we're in this pause, how you might be able to connect with us. So first things first, make sure that you go and you connect with Nichole on social media. You watch the incredible talk I was talking about, and let us know what you think. If you're on a podcast platform where you can rate and review us, please do that. And if you want to shoot us a note, you can connect with us over on social media. I'm at Nikki Innocent on all the social medias. I'm even over on Threads now. And if you would prefer to send an email, you can go to nikkiinnocent.com. And at the bottom of the screen, there's a button that you can press and you can send us an email. I think there's a contact button. You can contact us. There are a bunch of ways. If you want to have your voice heard or you have any thoughts, we would love to hear from you, especially as we are building this podcast to be even more amazing, I hope, to kind of bring you what you all are looking for and to chart this path forward that gives us a world and a space that makes us all feel like we can be exactly who we are and take up space that way and see other people doing the same and feel even more buoyed in the fascination of what it is to be human beings here in this collective experience. I will catch you on the next episode, my friends.